Hey guys, with another One Take review and the ninth entry in my Rock Hall review series for this year. This is the series where I review one album by each of the current year's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame nominees, and today I am talking about Fela Kuti, or more specifically Fela Kuti and Afrika 70. Afrika 70 isn't nominated along with him, but it just so happens that this album features Afrika 70 with him, and that album is none other than what's probably his most legendary album, Zombie. Real quick, I just wanted to make a small little note that I am reviewing the original pressing version of this album, which just features the title track and Mr. Follow Follow as the two different songs. There's a bunch of different versions online. The Spotify version's different. I haven't checked other streaming services, but I'm sure if you check others, they might be different as well. Rate Your Music lists it as a different track list and stuff, but that is the original pressings track list, and that's what I'm basing it off of. I'm just going to go with what was originally released, so yeah, just those two songs. But anyways, on with the review. Zombie is kind of a tricky album for me sometimes, not because I don't like it, I'll get to why I love it in a second, but sometimes I want to add it to like my most overrated albums list because of how much love it gets, and it arguably being the only album from Africa to really get a lot of, or at least one of the only albums from Africa to get a lot more mainstream attention. But in that way, I kind of feel like it almost clouds why this album is so great, and that, and also the fact that my favorite Fela Kuti album is also Gentleman, and not this album. But every time that I revisit it, I just end up realizing this is obviously deserving of the title of maybe Africa's most famous album. I think that's something that really made Fela Kuti and Afrika 70 such captivating performers is the fact that they were really able to just keep on jamming without ever really losing your attention or kind of letting go of you. I mean, even if you look at some of the greatest improvisers and jam bands and jam acts of all time, like, say, the Grateful Dead, they were even known to noodle from time to time, and some of their live performances would sort of just kind of drift off into nothingness, and I mean, it's the Grateful Dead. I'm sure mass amounts of drug intake had something to do with that, but lack of Fela Kuti and Afrika 70's LSD usage aside, they are just able to play both of the songs in this album, which are well over 10 minutes long in length, and just completely have you by the shoulders the entire time. They just don't let go, even though there's kind of just mainly instrumentals with some, well, a fair amount of lyricism thrown in, but the songs are so long it doesn't feel like a lot. They just don't stop. They just kind of keep going to the point where you're almost waiting for that moment where you become disinterested in it, but it just never truly ends. It's just such a very immediately engaging album. Afrobeat is definitely a genre that can sometimes be weighed down by lengthy song lengths or just lengthy album lengths overall, even though this album isn't super long. Like I said, both songs are very long. So even though those long song lengths ring true for Zombie as an album, the winded dryness of it is definitely not. This is just an incredibly enjoyable album from front to back. I think the main reason why this works so well as a two-song album and why so many other Fela Kuti and Afrika 70 albums work so well as two, three-song long albums is because they're able to create just a very natural environment. I mean, obviously this was recorded in a very professional manner and whatnot, but at the same time, there's just something very natural about the way that each song is performed here. It's just some of the finest musicians of all of Africa perfectly in sync with each other, and I mean, it just ends up creating one of the best albums from one of the best bands to ever come out of the continent, really. And that's saying something because Africa, a lot of underrated music, and I mean, there's just the way they kind of like riff off each other but still stay as one solid unit. It's almost hard to describe. It's just incredibly impressive, and again, it just makes for a very just weirdly touching album overall, even if it's not necessarily an emotional record, or at least not emotional in the way that you might be expecting, because it's very political, which I'll talk about in a moment. But it just becomes a very, I don't know, it's just, it doesn't so much touch your emotions as it does kind of whatever you would consider musical stimulation, I guess. I don't know. It's difficult to explain, and I really do recommend listening to it to see what I'm talking about. But it's an experience overall, and so is the rest of Fela Kuti's music. Of course, I even have yet to talk about Fela Kuti himself, and I mean, of course, he's a great saxophonist. He's a strong performer with his instrument, But I do think more than that, he's a very underrated vocalist. Though maybe vocalist is a bad term because he's kind of a yeller and a rambler above all, and that may sound like negative criticism, but it's really not because Fela Kuti just has this sort of a sense of conviction about what he's saying that it just makes it a very intense performance overall, and it really just lifts him above all of the music that's happening around him. And even though he is probably best remembered as a very, very talented saxophonist who really shines on this album, I do think that his vocals are definitely something to kind of look back on equally as fondly. Like I said before, like many other Fela Kuti and Afrika 70 albums and just general Fela Kuti albums, Zombie is an intensely political record, but I do think there is more historical weight to this album than probably any other, not probably, definitely any other in their discography, and that's a pretty huge discography as well. Now, this album has a lot of very anti police themes, and Zombie was just a very popular record in Africa for its time. You could argue that Fela Kuti was one of probably the first African artists to really kind of break through to a mainstream audience, both within his continent and otherwise internationally. And that didn't please the Nigerian government too much. Kuti was already on very thin ice with, like I said, previous political albums, and that resulted in just the Nigerian government becoming let's just say less than pleased with what was being said here. 1,000 members of the Nigerian police were sent to the Calacuta Republic, which was a commune founded by none other than Fela Kuti himself, but many people did live there. The place was pretty much entirely burnt down by the Nigerian police force. All of Fela Kuti's instruments and master tapes were completely lost in the fires, as you may expect. However, much worse than that was the near-death beating that was given to Fela Kuti, as well as the fatal injuries that were delivered to his mother. She was, I believe, thrown out a window. I could be mistaken about that, but I believe that's what happened, and the injuries that were delivered to her from that assault ended up resulting in her death, unfortunately. Her name was Funmilayo Ransom Kuti. I'm sorry if I mispronounced her name, but nonetheless, she was a very noteworthy women's rights activist, and I do recommend that she's someone that you read about, even if you're not very interested in that topic. I think she's a very important person, and I ended up reading more about her due to my research about this album and, about the political significance of it. And it kind of seems like she's almost a figure lost to time, and I think that more people should be reading about her importance. But nonetheless, there were no hollow threats of rebellion here, is my point. This record made some very strong political suggestions, and the Nigerian government responded, I guess you could say. And my point is, there's just a sort of an extra bit of historical and emotional weight knowing what happened after the release of this album. And again, I don't think it's confirmed. Like, I don't think the Nigerian government ever directly said, "Oh, hey, this album is what made us do this attack." But at the same time, I don't think it's anything short of not a coincidence when a band releases an anti-police slash anti-government album and is then attacked by the government and the government's police force. So I don't. It's just a very heavy album, I guess. And I mean, whether you consider it just another Afrobeat album or you consider it something much more powerful, Zombie is now woven into the history of Nigeria. So overall, Zombie is not only a fantastic album and definitely one of Fela Kuti and Afrika 70's best, but it's a deeply historically important album at this point, and maybe one of the most important albums ever recorded, to be honest. And with that being said, I think that this is an incredibly impactful album, and I'm going to have to give it 4.5 stars out of 5. It may not be my favorite by Fela Kuti, but it may just be his most important. This is usually where I end the review, and then I just kind of, do my sign-off, and that's it. But since this is my Rock Hall review series, I talk about, deserving to get in, will they get in, etc., etc., and as for Fela Kuti, as far as deserving goes, yes, absolutely, he's one of the most deserving artists on the ballot this year, just like he was last year. Not only would it bring in more representation for Africa as a continent, but I also do genuinely think that Afrobeat as a genre, and maybe even modern music itself, would not be the same without Fela Kuti. There's just so many different intricacies that have sort of almost, I don't want to say carried over into mainstream music because that would be kind of a lie, but it's just carried over into American music, I guess, English speaking music from England as well. I don't worry, I know that America's not the only English speaking country, believe me. But my point is, Fela Kuti did something that I think very few artists from Africa are able to do, unfortunately, which is make an international impact. And if that doesn't say something about his importance in the history of music, then I truly don't know what does. As far as will he get in, this one's tough because last year I didn't think he was going to get in when he got announced. But then after a while, I thought he was going to get in because he's doing really well in the fan poll. There's a lot of support behind him. There are literal movements to get him inducted. And then he didn't, and I thought, oh hey, maybe he'll get musical excellence or something. And then he didn't. So I don't know. This year, I think he might have a slight chance of being inducted, if not for just the hall being like, oops, we messed up last year, let's put him in. But to be completely honest, I think they're going to do this year with Fela Kuti what they did last year with LL Cool J. Put him in the musical excellence category. I know some people will be unhappy about that. I'm fine with it personally. I think recognition is recognition. LL Cool J got a performance last year, even though he got musical excellence. So Fela Kuti, maybe he'll get one as well, even if he's no longer living, which he's not. But still, there may be a tribute or something. And as long as artists like this, very important musicians from not only countries but just entire continents that are not often recognized in music, are getting recognized now in a mainstream English-speaking society, I think that's a good thing, no matter how it's done. So yeah, that's the end of this review. 4.5 stars out of 5 for Zombie. Absolutely deserving to get in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Might get in, but I think through the side categories, musical excellence. So yeah, 4.5 stars out of 5. And with that being said, that is the end of this review, and I will see you guys in the next one.